I'm honored to introduce someone whose courage defines our moment. Since 2014, Oleksandra Matviichuk and the Center for Civil Liberties have documented tens of thousands of war crimes in Ukraine. While bombs fell around her, she built an evidence base for justice, proof that in the battle between facts and lies, truth tellers will not surrender. She's also a lawyer, right? So I've been surrounded by lots of lawyers in the last few years. You know, while we in Rappler know what it means to face power with nothing but the truth, Filipino journalists know this, Oleksandra does more. She coordinates networks of volunteers who document atrocities under fire. She's watched her country burn. She's been threatened. And still, she documents. She listens to the victims and takes down their trauma. She builds the case for accountability, one testimony at a time, and I worry about her. We share the same fight, whether in Kiev or Manila. The front line is information integrity. Because remember, without facts, you can't have truth. Without truth, you can't have trust. Without this, we have no shared reality, no justice, no future. Oleksandra reminds us that human rights work isn't abstract, it is dangerous, daily, essential. She's building the foundation for a world where might does not make right, where war criminals face consequences, where democracy can still win. She formed the 2022 Nobel Peace Prize winning Center for Civil Liberties. She is one of the fiercest defenders of human dignity alive today. Please welcome Oleksandra Matviichuk from Ukraine.
Thank you very much for providing me a floor. It's a huge honor for me to address to this distinguished audience. I'm a human rights lawyer, and I'm applying the law to defend people and human dignity for many years. But now I'm in a situation when the law doesn't work. Russia broke the UN Charter and launched the war of aggression against Ukraine. Russian troops are deliberately hitting residential buildings, schools, churches, museums, and hospitals. They attacking evacuation corridors. They torturing people in filtration camps. They forcibly taking Ukrainian children to Russia. They ban Ukrainian language and culture. They abducting, robbing, raping, and killing civilians in the occupied territories. And the entire UN system of peace and security can't stop this. While this war turns people into the numbers, what we are literally doing, we are returning people their names, because people are not numbers, and life of each person matters. Let me share with you one story from our database. This is a story of 10-year-old boy Ilya from Mariupol. When Russians tried to siege the city, they didn't allow the International Committee of Red Cross to open the green corridors and to evacuate civilians. Hence, Ilya and his mother, like thousands and thousands other people in the city, had to hide in the basement of their residential building from Russian shelling. They melted snow to have water, and they made fires to cook at least some food. But when supplies ran out, they were forced to go out, and suddenly they appeared in the center of Russian shelling. Ilya's mother was hit in her head, and the boy's legs were torn. With the last strength, his mother took her son to the front apartment. It was no medical assistance because Prior to this, Russians deliberately destroyed maternity hospital and entire medical infrastructure in Mariupol. So in this friend apartment, they just lay down on a couch and they hugged each other. They were lying like this for several hours. And this 10-year-old boy told to my colleague how his mother died and got frozen right in his arms. As a human rights lawyer, I have a question. How we people who live in 21st century will defend human beings, their lives, their freedom, and their human dignity? Can we rely on the law, or does just brutal force matter? The answer to this question is important not just for people in Ukraine, in Syria, in Sudan, in Myanmar, in Nicaragua, or Venezuela. The answer to this question will define our common future. I don't know how historians in future will call this historical period, but the world order, which is based on UN Charter and international law, is collapsing before our eyes. Even my smartphone has an expiration date. This system was built in past century and has never been reformed. It's just stalling. It's reproducing ritualistic movements. It's easy to predict that fires like wars will emerge more and more often in different parts of the globe because this international wiring is faulty and sparks are everywhere. And when we speak about Russian war of aggression against Ukraine, this is not just a war between two states. This is a war between two systems, authoritarianism and democracy. Because with this war, Putin attempts to convince the entire world that country with a strong military potential and nuclear weapon can break the UN Charter, can dictate its rules to entire international community, and even forcibly changed internationally recognized borders. So if Putin succeeds, it will encourage other authoritarian leaders in different parts of the globe to do the same. I work with people affected by this war directly. So let me assure you that people in Ukraine dream about peace. But peace doesn't come when country which was invaded stop resisting. That's not peace, that's occupation. An occupation is the same war, but just in another form. Occupation is not just changing one state flag to another. Occupation means enforced disappearances, torture, rape, denial of your identity, forcible adoption of your own children, filtration camps, and mass graves. This is Russian occupation. Let me illustrate it with story. This is a story of children's writer Volodymyr Vakulenko. He wrote beautiful stories for Ukrainian children, an entire generation brought up on his Daddy's book. During Russian occupation, he disappeared. I know his family. His family hoped to the last that he's alive, but like thousands of other people, are illegally kept in Russian captivity. But when Ukrainian army liberated Kharkiv region, we found mass graves in the forest near city Izum. And in unmarked grave, under the number 319, we found dead body of this children's writer. And you can ask me, why Russians killed children's writer? The answer is simple. Because they could. Because this is what occupation is about. I know that people start to understand that the war is going on only when the bombs fall on their head. But war has not just military, but other dimension and informational dimension as well. And this is a battle which has no limitation in national borders, the battle for your hearts and minds. Authoritarian regimes attack truth. They try to poison people with cynicism and apathy. They ruin trust between people. They destroyed our connection with reality. They use digital field for this, which overloaded with fake disinformation and propaganda. And it's led to a situation that people start to lose their ability to make a distinction between lie and truth. And that is why we must fight for truth. It's not a job just for journalists. It's a job for every honest citizen. Like my colleague, Ukrainian journalist Victoria Roshina. She was young, very talented, and unbelievably brave. She decided that this is her not just journalist, but civil obligation to go to the occupied territories to collect information, what Russia is doing with people there. And she disappeared. Now we know that she was abducted by herself, severely tortured, and illegally transported to Russia, where she was kept with any official charges. We also know that she didn't receive medical care, and according to the words of her cellmate, her weight was only 30 kilograms. But we still have no idea how she died. Because Russians refused to return her body to the grieving parents for 6 months, and when they did, we found the dead bodies of our colleague with horrible signs of torture, and several internal organs were missing: eye, brain, and part of trachea. And I tell in this story because my colleague, Ukrainian journalist Victoria Roshina, believed that truth matters, that we have to fight for truth. And despite this tragedy, I don't think that she is naive. So let me finish with some words of hope. We all need it in these turbulent times. Being a human rights lawyer in a situation when the law doesn't work, I know from my own experience, when you can't rely on the legal instruments, when you can't rely on the UN system of peace and security, you can still rely on people. We get used to thinking through the categories of states and interstate organizations, but ordinary people have a much greater impact than they can even imagine. Ordinary people can do extraordinary things. And Ukrainians is also one of example, because when large-scale war started, not just Putin, all our international partners were confident that Ukraine has no potential to resist to such enormous opposing power. I was in Kiev at that time. I refused to evacuate, and with a part of my team, we continued our work on the ground. So we witnessed how international organizations evacuated their personnel, even international humanitarian organizations. They left us alone, but ordinary people remained. It were ordinary people who helped to survive under artillery's fire. It were ordinary people who took people out from the ruined cities. It were ordinary people who broke through the encirclement to provide humanitarian aid, and suddenly it became obvious that ordinary people fighting for their freedom and human dignity are stronger than even the second army in the world. And I would never wish anyone to go through our experience, because the war is probably most horrible things which just can happen in a human life. But these dramatic times provide us the possibility to express the best in us, to be courageous, to fight for freedom, to make a difficult but right choices, and to help each other. Because only when we help in each other, only in that moment we are acutely aware what does it mean to be human. And I want to tell you to the end one important personal story about people who mean a lot for me. I interviewed him as a lawyer. It's a Ukrainian professor on philosophy, scientist Igor Kozlovsky. He spent 700 days in Russian captivity. Before that, I interviewed hundreds of people. They told me how they were beaten, raped, smashed into wooden boxes, their fingers were cut, their nails were torn away, their nails were drilled, they were electrically shocked through their genitalia. One woman told me how her eye was dragged out with a spoon. So it was little that could surprise me after all the stories. But Professor Igor Kozlovsky, he mentioned a detail which was insignificant for the evidence base, but this detail impressed me. He described how he was kept in solitary confinement in tiny cell in basement with no window, no light, no fresh air. It was purely ventilated. It was difficult for him to breathe. Sewage flows on the dirty floor. And through the opening of the sewage, rats were crawling down. So the detail which impressed me, he told that he gave lectures on philosophy to these rats just in order to hear a sound of human voice. And legally, Igor Kozlovsky is a victim because he was abducted, illegally detained, kept in unhuman conditions. He was tortured so severely that he had to learn how to walk again. But he told to me that all his experience, it's not a reason for him to treat himself as a victim, because the basis of our existence is dignity, not victimhood. And dignity is action. Dignity makes us to feel responsible for everything which is going on. Dignity provides us a courage to fight even in unbearable conditions, because we are not hostages of circumstances. We are participants of this historical process. So let me finish that despite everything, the story of Ukraine, it's a life-affirming story, because these dramatic times raise hope. Because when freedom is denied, it becomes powerfully break out through the every concrete individuals. Because we still have a chance. Our future is not just unclear, it's also not pre-written. It means that we still have a chance to fight for future we want for us and for our own children. And hope, it's not a confidence that everything will be fine. Hope is a deep understanding that all our efforts have a huge meaning. Thank you. Героям слава!